So I should begin by telling you who I am and why I'm here. My name is Patrick Malloy, and I'm the Sub-Dean. Oh, I'm allowed to take my mask off. We're not allowed to take our masks off at home. Thank you. I'm Patrick Malloy. I'm the Sub-Dean of the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine in New York City. And the reason that I'm here is that this is a Theological Education Sunday in the Episcopal Church. And in a previous incarnation, I was a professor at our seminary in New York, the General Theological Seminary, and I was for a time the dean of the seminary. And so your wonderful staff invited me to come here and preach today and to lead the adult forum. And so that's why I'm here. Let me go back to New York City for a minute, in my mind's eye, to 2012, summer of 2012. An acquaintance of mine contacted me to say that an acquaintance of his was having a particular struggle in his life, and my acquaintance thought that I might be a good person for him to talk to. I didn't know what was really going on with this young man, but I agreed to meet him for lunch, and so I did. The day that I met him in that restaurant, I had never seen him before. I didn't know anything about him except his name and his phone number. And so we began to talk, and I discovered that he was an Episcopalian. And there aren't many of us, so that was a rather odd thing. And then I found out that he was not only an Episcopalian, but he went to church every Sunday. And I can assure you that in New York City, no young people go to church every Sunday. So I thought it was, by New York standards, rather bizarre, this young man. But here's what was not bizarre by New York standards. And that is, he told me that his job was killing him, that his job was eroding his soul. And I don't know how it is in Cleveland, but I know that in New York City, a lot of young people are finding that their jobs are eroding their souls. They can make a lot of money in New York. They can buy a lot of stuff. They can go a lot of places, but they can still feel empty, and a lot of them do. So this guy, he did PR for an international banking firm. And he, during lunch, was thinking out loud that what he really needed to do was start doing PR for a not-for-profit. Being the good Episcopalian that he was, he thought maybe he could even do PR for the church. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. You'll work twice as hard to make half the money, and no one will ever thank you. This is not a way to find happiness. So lunch went on like that, and I listened, and my next appointment was coming across the street at the seminary, tick-tock, and I thought, I've got to wrap this up. So I decided to cut to the chase. I figured I would never see him again, so I figured there was nothing to lose. I might as well tell him what I was picking up from him. I told him that he would never be happy doing PR. I told him that no matter who he did it for, he would still not be happy because he did not want to do PR. I told him that he wanted to be a priest. When I was a seminary professor, and especially when I was the dean of the seminary, every seminarian everyone who wanted to come to the seminary had to be interviewed by me. So I met a lot of aspiring seminarians. Most of them weren't like this young man. They would come and they would visit me, and many of them would tell me in all earnestness and honestly that God had appeared to them and told them to be a priest. They had had a vision, or they had had some sort of a bodily sensation, or they had heard voices. And I think they told me those things because they thought that's what you had to say to get into seminary. And I suspected that they had been through any number of the many committees that you have to go through to get into seminary in their diocese, and they had been thought in through all those committees that you have to say those sorts of things if people are going to believe you actually have a call to the priesthood and you want to get into seminary. But those people always made me extremely nervous. The scriptures, the scriptures are full of people like that. Like, look at Isaiah this morning. Isaiah had this amazing vision. We hear from Paul today saying that he was one untimely born, and of course he was referring to his experience of Jesus on the Damascus Road when he heard Jesus' voice and the blinding light knocked him over, right? So I guess people do hear voices and have visions. Who am I to question the Holy Scriptures? But I would say that doesn't happen often. And I would say it hardly ever happens. I think what actually does happen for most people, it's not visions and it's not voices. I find that what happens with most people is they simply come upon something and it just seems right. Something just seems to fit for them. For a lot of us, that fit is so perfect that we just can't imagine ourselves doing anything else, or really being anything else. The fit is so perfect. We just can't imagine being anything else than the thing that we discover when we discover the thing that really fits. And that's what the church means by vocation. That's what the church means by vocation. It doesn't mean having a vision or hearing voices telling you what to do. It means discovering in your life the thing that is your best fit. That is your vocation. And so the guy at lunch, just to be clear, I didn't tell him that I thought he should be a priest. I was not some voice that he was hearing. I didn't know what he should do for a living. I thought I would never see him again. I barely knew him. What I told him was that I heard him saying that he wanted to be a priest. That I heard him clearly saying that he wanted to be a priest. By reading between the lines in the conversation, I heard him say something that he couldn't hear himself say. So, yes, God may actually visit upon some people visions and voices. My skepticism about such things doesn't mean that they're not so. But the way God calls most people is not like that. The way God calls most people is that through the changes and chances of our lives, we are gradually built into becoming the people we are. And that happens through the kindnesses that happen to us and the cruelties. It happens through the embraces and the slugs that we endure. It happens through the times when we have profound insights and the times when we are deeply confused. Through all of that, bit by bit, we are becoming who we are. All of those events in life shape us, and day by day, through our entire life, we become somebody. And then we find ourselves dreaming of what we want to do, or dreaming of what we want to be. It may come to us in a flash, but it's been building all along. And that is vocation. So, because this is Theological Education Sunday, and we would not have the pleasure of being together if it weren't, I should be talking about seminaries and other theological schools. But before I get to that, I want to say one other thing. I want to talk a little bit more, if you entertain me, the business of vocation. This business of vocation, it's not about the diaconate or the priesthood or the episcopate or monastic life. It's not about that. Here's what vocation is about. Vocation is about the many ways that life forms every single person until it gives them a best fit thing to do, a best fit thing to be. And that means that every one of us in this room has a vocation. Every one of us has our best fit. Some of us just know what it is, and always have known it. Some of us have had to struggle and wait a long time to get to that point, and some of us are still struggling, even at the age that most of us are. Some of us find our best fit when we're young, and some of us aren't so young. But whether we find it young or old, or whatever it is, all of us have it. All of us have vocation. And right now, back in New York City, there are young people who do PR for a bank, and that is exactly what they are supposed to be doing. That is their best fit. It is part of their vocation. It does not leave them feeling empty. By inches and by steps, tiny steps, their life has brought them to a point where doing PR for a bank is exactly what they're supposed to do. And somehow, God's reign may be closer because of the way they're doing it. It is their vocation. Some of us are built to be single. Some of us are built to be partnered. Some of us are built to do science. And some of us are built to write poems. And I know people who have very difficult lives. I mean really difficult lives. And yet they would not have it any other way, because by tiny little steps they have come to a point where they realize that is exactly the life that they are meant to have, as difficult as it might be. And some of us are built to be priests. And some of us are built to be whatever you are built to be. And all of it is just as good as all the rest. Whoever we are, bit by bit, life builds us. And God can use all of that for God's good purpose. So Jesus found himself at the lake of Gennesaret. And Peter and James and John caught so many fish that their 2 boats were going to capsize. And Peter told Jesus to go away. Go away from me, Lord. He said, I am a sinful man. There are many ways to explain Peter saying that, but I have to wonder if part of it wasn't that Peter had some intuition of what this was going to mean to him and do to him. The hymn that we just sang, I brought my hymnal, 661. It is one of the most depressing hymns in the hymnal. It is a heartbreaker, and I never noticed it before. What it says is, they were just as happy as could be. And then Jesus came along. And after that, they ended up in exile on Patmos. They were crucified upside down. And then they say, the peace of God, it is no peace. Right? Maybe Peter realized that when Jesus, this amazing stranger, met him on the beach and gave him all the fish. And he thought, oh man, am I ever in for it? But the thing is, Peter had fallen in love. And once you fall in love, it's just too late, you know? They say that, and I really read this seriously, that falling in love is evolution's way of getting us hooked until we realize it's too late. You know, you fall in love, you get married, you have a kid, and then you think, oh my God, what did I do? But evolution gives us falling in love to get us hooked so that we can move into the thing that in the long run really is the thing that we're meant to do. I think sometimes moments of clarity in religion are like that. moments of spiritual clarity. They're inebriating, and they get us hooked like the fish. And then there's the rest. Back at the seminary, I saw so many students walk onto the close, we call it, the close at General Seminary, at the beginning of the term, and they were so excited. And I could look at them and I thought, you think that every day you're going to go to chapel and experience nirvana. And you think that you're going to hear lectures and read books that are going to reinforce every unfortunate thing that you believe about God. And then at the end of all of that, you're going to go home and close your door and turn around, and Jesus is going to be standing there with a martini for you. But that's not the way it is. But by then, they had sold their homes, told everyone they were moving to New York to become priests, and paid for the first year of seminary, and it was too late by the time they realized that when they got home, there'd be nothing waiting for them but them. So this is Theological Education Sunday. It exists for two purposes. First is so that I can tell people like you who've never been to seminary what people like us have unfortunately experienced in seminary. And the other thing is to tell you that seminaries need your money and you should write a check. So, I have just told you that. You should do that as good Episcopalians. But let's now talk about the other thing. When Peter fell in love with Jesus, he had no idea where it would take him. He just knew that he had to go where Jesus was going. And I think that's how it is when we fall in love. Whether we fall in love with a person, or we fall in love with a hobby, or we fall in love with the study of physics, or we fall in love with being in retail, or we fall in love with doing PR for a bank. You just do it when you fall in love with it, because you've just got to, come what may. What I've seen in theological education, what happens in seminaries, is that the chapel almost never brings people anywhere near nirvana. And mostly every assumption they brought to seminary, it gets destroyed. And when they go home at the end of the day, there's just them. What's waiting for them is just them. But here's the thing. If they stick it out, if you stick it out at whatever your best fit thing is, your vocation is, if you stick it out, you might discover amazing things. Whether you're a parent, or you're in retail, or you're in the military, or whatever you are. If you're a parent and you stick it out, you might just find that putting up with your petulant teenager is a doorway into a fuller life than you ever imagined. Or you may find, if you're in retail, that helping that customer with Alzheimer's figure out how to use her credit card is a moment of God's grace. Or you might find, as odd as it may seem, that fighting a war is the way that you can help the world be at peace, as hard as it is to understand. In all of our lives, in all of our vocations, sisters and brothers, going deep into what you're called to be, your best fit, going deep, that's where true life is. And it's not always easy. And it's almost never what we thought it was going to be. But if we find ourselves in the place that really is our best fit, with all of its joys and all of its disappointments, in the place that fits best, in our true vocation, there we will find life.